M3 Pro or M3 Air, which one should you pick? I've used both of them and I'm ready to give my conclusion. In this video, I'm going to answer the most burning questions about these Macs. How big is the performance gap? Are the Pro features worth it? How to spend the least money? Get comfortable, brew yourself a cup of coffee, and let's unpack this. Right off the bat, I want to say that these two MacBooks are from two different leagues, each one targeting a specific audience. The M3 Air aims at entry-level users who have relatively simple tasks, and the M3 Pro targets more professional, more demanding users. This makes picking the MacBook super difficult, especially if you're someone in between. By now, you already know everything about their specs, the display resolution, number of performance and efficiency cores, all that stuff. So let's not get too technical today and look at more the stuff you're likely to do with your new MacBook. Starting with consuming content. This action isn't all that demanding in terms of performance, so both laptops really shine here. Both have great displays and great speakers. MacBook Pro obviously has the best versions of these things, but the difference isn't all that huge, especially if you don't have both machines lying around. All movies and YouTube videos are 24, 30, or 60 frames per second, so the Pro Motion display of the MacBook Pro usually isn't used to its fullest. However, the deep blacks on MacBook Pro make the viewing experience much better, especially in the evening or at night. On the MacBook Air, the whole display lights up and black colors look more like dark gray, which I don't really like. You can easily live with that, but I hope in a few years Apple will change that. However, don't think that because the MacBook Pro has mini LED and the blacks are really black, it doesn't have any problems, because it does. All bright elements on the screen have this weird halo effect, and this has to do with the display technology itself. Again, while watching movies, this is only noticeable when you have something really white on the dark background, like the credits. When it comes to the sound quality and loudness, the MacBook Pro beats the MacBook Air in every way possible. But the difference isn't all that huge, really. The speakers on MacBook Air are really loud and clear, albeit a bit small and weirdly located. On the MacBook Pro, the sound comes from these grills, right towards you, while on the MacBook Air, the sound comes from under the screen. If you want to get a somewhat similar sound from the MacBook Air, you should opt for the 15-inch model. It simply has more speakers, and the sound is a bit better. But what about the daily workflow? How do these machines stack up? Well, when it comes to casual web browsing, type in simple documents, and doing some light work, the MacBook Air holds up just fine. If you're not overloading it with stuff, the low amount of unified memory doesn't really slow it down that much. The websites open fast and rarely reload, typing doesn't lag behind, and the overall experience is very much pleasant. However, if you do try to do some demanding things on this MacBook Air, even the power of the M3 isn't enough to compensate for 8 gigs of memory. But don't get me wrong, to really notice these slowdowns, you have to really load things up with tasks. Multiple tabs in Chrome, video editor, rendering the video in the background, some other apps opened, only then you'd see that famous beach ball. Though, I will admit, it all sounds worse than it really is. And in real life, you rarely load your Mac that much. For example, I'm a content creator, so I do a lot of file management, video editing, I type scripts, and have a ton of tabs open. But usually I do these things separately, not all at once. If I need to type scripts and do the research, I only have my browser opened, and sometimes add pages to the mix with background music playing, either from YouTube or from Apple Music. And the MacBook Air doesn't have any issues with this sort of load. Everything is fast and snappy. Or when I need to transfer some files and edit a video, I do just that and rarely have the browser or any other apps opened. That's why I think for 95% of the time, I would be fine with the M3 MacBook Air. However, there are those 5% where I do need the MacBook Pro. And it's much easier to talk about performance here because it never disappoints. Remember how I said that usually I do one thing at a time on my Mac? Well, on MacBook Pro, I can actually do all those things at the same time and still have headroom for more. This thing is absolutely crazy, even in its base config. If you get it, it will be more than fine for you for at least a couple of years, and when you outgrow it, it would still be plenty powerful for its next owner. But the MacBook Air doesn't have enough ports. It only has 2 USB-C ports, and to do any creative work or to connect an external display, you would need to buy an adapter. The Pro MacBook has 3 Type-C ports, an SD card reader, an HDMI, and I think it goes without saying that this selection is much better than what the MacBook Air has, but I think for most people, a hub is not an issue. I generally find it hard to find find something about any of these MacBooks that could be an issue. Before Apple transitioned to Apple Silicon, there were two huge issues with all MacBooks: loudness and battery life. Here, obviously, none of these issues persist. Both the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro have fantastic battery life. If you watch movies all day, you can do it on a single charge and still have some juice left by the evening. And if you do some more demanding stuff, then it gets harder to predict how much each Mac will last. Something that I usually use as an example is video editing. The 14-inch MacBook Pro is more powerful than the MacBook Air, thus can finish faster. The MacBook Air, on the other hand, will need more time to finish the task, so the combined energy usage on it can end up higher than on a MacBook Pro. Let's not play mind games and just say that you definitely will not be disappointed with the battery life on either of these MacBooks. This I can pretty much guarantee. I've been using Apple Silicon MacBooks since the M1 MacBook Air came out, and I never had any issues or complaints about the battery life. In case you're new to the channel, I'm a bit of a design geek. I like beautiful things, and I do care about how my computer looks. And luckily, none of these two MacBooks disappoint. Slick aluminum body with rounded edges, acceptable thickness and weight. Everything is pretty much spot on. Obviously, the MacBook Pro weighs more, it has a bigger battery, beefier cooling system, it's slightly bigger by itself, though it is still very much portable and comfortable to take everywhere with me. Obviously, the MacBook Air would be slightly more comfortable, slightly lighter, and slightly thinner, so I guess if you travel a lot and you need the lightest laptop you can get with the most power, the M3 MacBook Air would do just fine for you. But don't think that these laptops are perfect. They have their fair share of issues. The biggest one for me is the keyboard. It seems like Apple uses a biodegradable plastic because these keys deteriorate as we speak. It's baffling to me how such expensive computers can use such terrible keyboard plastics. Something definitely needs to change. Yet the main problem I have with the M3 MacBook Air is that it's simply is too similar to the M2 model. It has the same exact design, the same display, speakers, webcam, everything except for the chip inside is the same. It even has the same 8 gigs of unified memory and 256 gigs of SSD in its base config, so all the limitations are the same. Sure, the M3 is more powerful than the M2, but both of these laptops are fanless, so neither of the chips can fully spread its wings and show its true potential. So if you're really thinking about the M3 MacBook Air, maybe it's time to take a look at the M2 MacBook Air. Right now you can get the M3 Air for $1,050 on Amazon, brand new. This is $50 less than it would cost you to get it from Apple. The M2 MacBook Air at Best Buy is only $849. And in light of everything I told you earlier, this seems like a better deal. If you don't need much from a laptop, of course. I will leave Amazon links to all Macs in the video description, along with some extra links to the gear I'm using. For $200 less, you won't see really that much of a difference. The apps will still open super fast and work flawlessly, the web browser will work stutter-free, and watching movies will still be a bliss. It's time for everyone to understand that the MacBook Air is not fit for continuous, serious workflow. It can do it, but only at a short distance. You can't use the MacBook Air, whether it is the M3 or the M2 model, for everyday 4K video editing, complex 3D or stuff like that. These MacBooks are pretty much glorified typing machines, perfect for simple stuff, capable of something more, but not fit to do it often. The best part about going for the M2 MacBook Air instead is that even when compared to the M3 Pro 14-inch MacBook Pro, it still holds up rather fine. And if you count in the huge price difference, then the M2 MacBook Air would start to look even better. I think if you need a machine that will help you make money, that will be with you for many years to come and still give you some headroom, the M3 Pro MacBook is the way to go. The M3 Pro 14-inch is $1699 refurbished from Apple or $1799 new on Amazon. So it's a $550 difference if you're considering the M3 Air, or an $850 difference if you're fine with the M2 Air. When picking between these two MacBooks, you should always keep in mind how you plan on using it, because you cannot approach the purchase with the idea of saving the most money. This doesn't work well. You need to put your own needs first and only then start negotiating the price. For example, if you're a college student and all you do is watch videos and type in lectures, then it doesn't make sense to buy the MacBook Pro only because you like how it looks. Just get the MacBook Air. And if you're a professional who needs a laptop for work and you need all the power you can get, then don't skimp and buy yourself a MacBook Pro. Another thing to keep in mind is that to properly use the M3 or the M2 MacBook Air, you need to upgrade the unified memory to 16 gigs, which is a $200 option. Preferably, you should get at least 512 gig SSD, which is also a $200 upgrade. So a cheap $1,000 MacBook Air suddenly starts costing $1,450. And this leaves you with only a $250 jump to the M3 Pro MacBook, a laptop with better everything. Instead of spending that money on upgrades, I would advise you to just get yourself a good external SSD in case you need this storage. The M3 Air isn't a laptop you would own for 5 years. After a few years from now, those 8 gigs of memory would be an even more severe bottleneck, and you would be basically forced to buy a new MacBook. So if I was making a decision on which laptop to get, I would go for the MacBook Pro, simply because it would be more economical in the long run. And if you still can't decide which MacBook you need, we have a great video where I went over each M series chip available and discussed who should buy it and why. Be sure to check it out. Thanks for watching, and see you there.